This video is brought to you by Dystera. Stick around to hear more about their ongoing global beta test. Okay, today, once again, I'll be discussing China because the control that the country is able to exercise, both economic and entertainment-oriented, is nothing short of insane. I've talked about this topic quite a few times in the past, mainly focusing on the country's control over video game consumption, with some other elements such as questionable, even alarming usage of certain filming locations for movies like Mulan. But today, I want to more broadly discuss the idea that China holds a vice-like grip on its entertainment sector, even our entertainment sector, with irrational, even downright baffling decisions about what to control and why. First things first, around 2020, after a long-standing stretch of United States dominance, China became, by far, the largest box office market in the world. Compared to the gaming industry, where China has been systematically cracking down on their own domestic companies, this indicates a larger consumption of cinema content as opposed to digital video games, and logically, as a result, they simultaneously became a focal point for most, if not all, major film releases. Where once it may have been true that American Hollywood films were primarily earning money from domestic sales, now American Hollywood films were capable of earning as much, if not far more, internationally, and one of the most prominent factors in that equation is China. So why does it matter? Well, it matters because this market, now the largest market for box office viewing on planet Earth, is controlled with an iron fist by the Chinese Communist Party. In order to even access that market, Hollywood needs to accommodate certain guidelines, and the result is rather incredible. Here are a few examples. The film 2012, released in November of 2009, depicted the end of our modern world at the expiration of the Mayan calendar. The film is good, in my opinion, but what may be less known about the story is that humanity only survives because China had the foresight to build massive floating arcs. This movie, as far back as 2009, grossed over $700 million in total, with $160 million domestic and $600 million international. Of that international market, as well, nearly $70 million came directly from China, and this was taking place in 2009 when the market differential was entirely different. How about another example? Gravity, a 2013 science fiction thriller starring Sandra Bullock, depicts the struggle of two astronauts trying to return to Earth. In the film, Sandra Bullock eventually survives, spoiler alert, sorry, by getting to the Chinese orbital space station. And similar to 2012, the film had incredible popularity in China, which led to over $70 million from that market alone. There are countless examples to draw from here. Transformers: Age of Extinction had a direct partnership with CCTV, and thus the Chinese government, where the film would depict China favorably. That was stipulated precisely. And within 5 days of release, it had surpassed North American metrics, becoming the most popular movie at the time in all of China, and earning over $200 million in 10 days from that particular market. There were even academic papers being written about the Chinification of Hollywood because of this movie, because it became something far more than a regular movie and marked the onset of Hollywood directly catering to China preemptively, even before censorship demands were ever made. The list goes on and on. Iron Man 3 had separate versions, one of which contained random, out-of-place scenes where Chinese doctors performed surgery on Mr. Stark. 21 and Over was apparently a completely different film between the two countries, and like I said, the list of examples is very long, stretched across 30 years of Hollywood filmmaking. Okay, before going any further, we have today's video sponsor, but this one is a bit different than normal. Today, the sponsor is Dystera, which is a survival-based game on a perishing Earth where you can loot, fight, build, and craft. Dystera has strong similarities to other survival games in the genre, but also blends time-based opportunity mechanics to escape the dying planet. Now, personally, I'm a sucker for this type of game, and rather than a traditional sponsorship where I tell you to go buy it right now, I can actually say that they are open for global testing, May 3rd to May 16th. If you click the link down below in the description, you can participate, and if you like it, make sure to add it to your wishlist. This is about maximizing player feedback for the global beta test, and thus I am very happy to help them find more players during that time frame. The game allows for a cooperative experience, or solo battles and raids, with an emphasis on the destructive power of scientific weapon research. That same research, by the way, has removed the tedium of hunger and temperature survival, which can often be detrimental to the overall experience, leaving a greater emphasis on scavenging, combat, and personal advancement. All in all, it has a lot of things that I personally enjoy, and it would be great to help them gather feedback and spread the word about the title. Again, link down below to check out the global beta in the description, and thank you to Dystera for sponsoring the channel. So why does it all matter? What is the harm or benefit to Chinese influence on Hollywood, and why am I making the video? The short answer is that you probably won't notice anything about this in everyday life. These changes are not overtly damaging to our individual routines, and they won't subject us to measurable harm in any sense of the word. Hollywood bending to the will of China is not something that causes a shock to the system. It's something that we get to write think pieces on and evaluate from afar. However, as the Chinese government covers for and perpetrates various humanitarian crisis acts within its borders and beyond, this kind of entertainment influence allows them to exercise subliminal control over the global population's image of the country. In order to access a box office market that is now far larger than any other on planet Earth, Hollywood film companies must preemptively cater to the strict censorship guidelines. Not that many films even make it into China as a result of their regulation framework, and in order to have a chance at that payday, right, to even go down that road, companies have become increasingly compliant. Here's a much more direct example. All the way back in 1997, two films were released in North America called Kundun and 7 Years in Tibet. These films were released only a short time after American movies were even allowed to access China, period, but much more importantly, they weren't even designed at the time to appeal to that market. Kundun, produced by Disney, I think it was, contained a scene where Mao Zedong, also known as Chairman Mao, the leader responsible for China's Communist Revolution, was depicted as basically an idiot. The film didn't even release in China, it was never intended to, but even still, their response was to completely ban Disney from their domestic market entirely in retaliation, which cost them a ridiculous amount of money because they were already pushing ahead with extensive plans to build a theme park on the mainland, and Disney makes a huge amount of its money from theme parks, and they were also establishing other business verticals in the country that had nothing to do with movies, and all of that got banned as well. In response, Disney executives released the film on Christmas Day in 4 theater locations and screens. And when the performance was bad, right, obviously the performance was bad, nobody's going to go watch that, they used that justification to kill it. They were banned from the country for about a year anyway, as a result, and the CEO at the time, Michael Eisner, had to fly to Beijing and officially apologize for releasing the movie. 7 Years in Tibet, a biographical war drama, I think it was, produced by Sony, for obvious reasons contained material that the Chinese government did not care for, and even though the film was not made for or ever released in China, Sony was putting all of its Chinese businesses at risk, which even included electronics and hardware, which is actually the primary vertical for Sony. Now, to their credit, Sony did not back down as easily as Disney did, and for a much more modern example, we can actually look at Spider-Man No Way Home. Spider-Man No Way Home was a global blockbuster produced by Sony, and it turns out that Chinese regulators had a very interesting request. In order to even begin the approval process for Chinese market access, which there's no guarantee they would have passed, regulators wanted Sony to remove the Statue of Liberty. Now, anyone who has seen the film will know that the Statue of Liberty is an enormous part of the third act, and that request is effectively impossible, so this might have less to do with principled bravery and more to do with legitimate impossibility, but regardless, Sony refused, and even when the request was lowered, they did not bow to Chinese censorship, keeping the film in its original condition. Now, I've heard many different speculative assumptions as to why this request was made in the first place, but the most common one is that the Statue of Liberty resembles another statue called the Goddess of Democracy, erected in the Tiananmen Square protests. This is quite plausible, it really is, since Tiananmen Square material is very often purged immediately from entertainment properties when discovered by Chinese regulators. Example, Call of Duty Cold War, the video game, in its official trailer, had less than 1 second of Tiananmen Square footage, and it was immediately banned in China, causing Activision Blizzard to revoke the trailer and scrub the frames. And I do mean that, it was just a couple of frames. The thing is, there are multiple other Statue of Liberty likenesses in China. There are replicas in theme parks, on memorials, and even one in what is considered the richest part of China entirely. While plausible, I don't know if it is a sure thing that the request was made as a result of similarity to Goddess of Democracy, but that's the prevailing theory that I've seen. Even so, regardless of why it still happened, and it showcases that not every film is catering to China, and not every company is jumping through hoops. However, even when there are exceptions, the general rule is still quite clear. Hollywood companies, and anyone who releases entertainment products in general on a global scale, are not allowed to depict anything that the Chinese Communist Party doesn't like. If they do, they will not just lose access to the market for that particular product, they will lose access for all of their products, and even their parent companies will be punished by cutting off access for any other business venture that they want to pursue. The level of control is intricate and insane. Once I went down the rabbit hole, I just couldn't stop, and the depth is honestly staggering. Mission Impossible 3, if you can believe this, I'll try to condense everything down. There's a ton of examples, but this one is just one of the more bizarre ones. Mission Impossible 3 was barred from being shown until scenes where clothes drying on like clotheslines and balconies were removed. The reason is that the scenes were shot in Shanghai, and the government claimed that the visual imagery of laundry hanging like that depicted something backward and primitive, which is not indicative of the real China. Everything we see with regards to Chinese culture, at least through a Hollywood lens, that's very important, is curated and tightly controlled. Companies who are owned by larger corporations, say a subsidiary of Disney like Fox or National Geographic, cannot say anything that the Communist Party does not like, and they are unbelievably strict on this, down to things like laundry on clotheslines, because the film won't just be banned, right? Not just that one product, but their parent company will then be subjected to widespread economic penalties in the country, in this case Disney with its myriad Chinese verticals, which effectively muzzles nearly all of Western Hollywood productions at a major scale in whatever way the CCP decides. This control does not just revolve around scripts and set pieces, it also involves actors. I'm sure there are many more examples, but one of the best ones to look at is Richard Gere. Richard Gere was a prominent A-list actor in the prime of his career when he decided to use his platform to speak out against human rights violations in China, and it surfaced that he had a friendship with the Dalai Lama in the past, Tibet's spiritual leader. As a result, his career was completely derailed. Major films would not accept him, and top-level studios denied him roles because the simple fact that he was in the movie would make the Chinese market inaccessible to them. He was left out of Oscar nominations while his direct peers on the same project were given recognition, and there were even times that he had secret phone calls with Chinese directors who said, "We can't do this movie, or I will lose everything and my family will never be allowed to leave the country again." He was completely blacklisted just because the Chinese Communist government didn't like him. Entertainment products, especially Hollywood pictures in particular, are subjected to unbelievable and widespread Chinese control. There are examples that buck this trend, there always will be, but what we see is not a true depiction of Chinese culture, material conditions, or humanitarian controversy, because the deeply rooted control within American entertainment is widespread and very effective. When you see a movie produced by a major Hollywood brand, whatever that brand may be, it is almost certainly constructed with direct feedback and input from the Chinese government. And if you see visual subject matter that takes place in China even, or refers to China, it is doctored, manipulated, and controlled to conceal who even knows what. Bottom line, the control that China holds over Western entertainment is insane, and it's growing. That's it. If you want to support, there are links down below. I'm trying to make locals and Patreon a more central funding method for the channel. AdSense is less than reliable these days, so check those out if you have any interest. There's also Odyssey, a YouTube platform alternative. There is Dystera. Check out the global beta if you'd like to. There's another YouTuber to check out. Merchandise, social media, etc., etc., but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.